Now all we gotta do is get back to her. Right.
With a mobile app.
Yeah.
How many Emeritus?
Yeah.
You have this gallery.
Which one?
It's always something different.
I said studio.
Thank God for these two.
Wow.
Go over to the red icon there.
Try to get. So.
Return the meeting?
Yeah.
Maybe
No,
The big one.
red, no, down there, he's got it. What, you almost had it. Right there.
There
Click.
you go.
There you go.
Ha ha. All right, I'm gonna go sit down.
Are we ready to go?
Ready to go.
I'm gonna mention the ally. Some new faces. Yeah. And also the grants. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Emeritus Center. I'm Jim Van Forest. I'm the Emeritus Center president, and I want to welcome you here today on this somewhat warm day for us anyway. Before Mary Ellen is introduced by Scott, I just thought I'd give you a couple updates on what we're doing and whatnot. We've talked about many times the Ally program, the Lifelong Learning, Albany Lifelong Learning Institute. We kicked it off. You've probably received emails. If you've been anywhere in public, you've probably seen our flyers. We're trying to get the word out there. So that starts in March. In the back is a handout. Has all the courses that we're going to offer and gives you some information on it. But hopefully you're able to attend at least one of the courses. And the only other thing I want to mention is the Emeritus Center has grants that we have available for Emeritus to do the work that they're doing, be it research, or they're going to a conference, whatever it is their interest is. We have some money to support them in doing it. Right now, it's an ongoing process, but right now we are especially we're looking at a few. So if you have an idea or something you would like to do, send in the request. We're happy to fund this. This is our main push as the Emeritus Centers to help Emeritus do the good things they're doing. And with that, I'll introduce Scott. And Scott can introduce Mary Ellen.
Let you find a comfortable seat.
There you go.
Yeah. Stay off camera.
Okay.
That way we don't get darts thrown up here or anything. I remember to put my glasses on before I start speaking with Dr. Mary Ellen Mallia, somebody who I'm just so happy to see, has served as UAlbany's Sustainability Director since January of 2008. In this position, she's advanced strategic planning initiatives related to campus environmental issues and worked with various academic departments and student groups to develop, implement, and coordinate environmental initiatives such as UAlbany's recycling and energy conservation. If you know Mary Ellen, you know so much more than that. Mary Ellen started on the evil empire. She received her bachelor's at Siena. I didn't write that. I could not say that. After playing in the pep band for so long, it's just like, Anyway, she started in Siena with her bachelor's in economics and began her career in the financial sector. She left that sector to pursue a career in teaching, which is so evident in the way you deal with some of us. Joining the Great Dane family by obtaining her master's in secondary social science education from UAlbany. She taught economics, public policy, and American history at Gilderland High School for 8 years, with a specialty in environmental economics. While fulfilling her teaching duties, she pursued her PhD at RPI in ecological economics, which she earned in 2006. Outside of work, Mary Ellen has a deep devotion to nature and especially the welfare of animals. We welcome her to the Emeritus Center. Mary Ellen, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Get on camera. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody in the room. I see some old friends. It's great to see you. And I'm going to start my presentation and get the mouse to cooperate with me. I'm a lefty. Yes, let's hear it for, see, now I can do it with the lefty. There we go. Okay. It's a right-handed world though. So the title of my talk is Facing the Climate Crisis, Understanding Impacts and Driving Change. When Scott approached me about doing a talk, I'm like, okay, what element of sustainability or what aspect would you like me to talk about? I gave him like 6 different ones. He's like, they all sound great. So this is obviously a very large topic, and there's many things in here that could be an hour on themselves, a slide. So I'm going to give you an overview. I also want to preface this by saying, as you heard in the introduction, I'm a social scientist. So I definitely bow down to my climate scientists who have much more in-depth knowledge on a lot of the slides I'm going to share. One of the challenges of being a sustainability director is one of the good things is you know a little bit about a lot of things. I really need to focus on strategic planning and decision-making and behavioral change. So those kinds of techniques, oh my God, this is embarrassing. I'm like, I thought I turned this off. Sorry. Communicating different behavioral changes, that's really what I probably know the most about. I do not know what kind of plants are planted somewhere. These are samples of emails I get. I do not know, some things like I had to do an article one time, an interview for an article about plastic recycling, and they were asking me a lot of, detailed chemistry stuff. So I apologize in advance for not knowing all those details, but maybe some of you can help fill in the blanks. One of the things I did do in the last few years is I took the climate reality training. If you're familiar with that, that is the Al Gore comprised training on how to communicate climate impacts, what's being done. I did the virtual version. There's virtual versions. There's some in-person versions. I'm going to be sharing some of the slides from the most recent slide deck that was done in October of 2024. There's been a few things that happened since then that won't be in the slide deck. So some of these slides are from that, and they are animated. So let's hope they work they worked when I practiced at home. And then I'll also talk a bit about UAlbany's efforts and the state's efforts, of which I probably have a little bit more in-depth knowledge and details. This is a dangerous thing to do in front of an academic audience. If you have a pressing question on any slide, feel free to ask. We don't have to wait till the end, but I know that's a dangerous thing because you probably have a pressing question on every slide. But feel free if you want to ask anything. Yeah, take turns. So we're going to look at some of the impacts, like I mentioned, of climate change as sometimes even though I follow obviously the story, seeing them together at once just for a year's worth reignites your desire to action, at least in my case. There's a lot of actionable solutions, so we'll talk a little bit about them. I'm not excited about always giving, here's a checklist of what you can do, but people like to have agency. I think agency is the antidote to climate anxiety, and coalitions is the antidote to despair. So sometimes if you look at that checklist and you're like, here's 2 things I'm not doing I could do, you have agency over that, so. But really a lot of this is talking about our health and the planet health. So where are we today? Okay, good, it's working. Okay. So here is a list of some of the biggest sources of greenhouse gas emissions globally. This is one of the climate reality slides. I did get some information from the New York State emission profile from the DEC. So I don't have the percentages of each of these categories here, but I can tell you for the state, and it gets a little tricky. Like everything with sustainability, it's complex. It's hard to do it in a soundbite and quickly, but it depends on how you categorize things. In the state, buildings account for 32% of our emissions, transportation 28%, electricity 13%, waste 12%, industry 9%, agriculture 6%. Those are the numbers that the DEC released. Again, it categorizes it a bit differently than you're seeing here on this slide, but it lets you prioritize. For example, I know for our campus footprint, operationally, a big section of it, at least as to the extent we calculate our footprint currently, there's scope 1, 2, 3 emissions. Our heat is our biggest contributor. So we've put a lot of our effort and budget planning into converting our heat to a renewable source. So these categories are helpful to help, again, decision-making. Burning of fossil fuels, we're going to zero in here on some of the key dates that they've pointed out in the reality presentation. So you can see the global financial crisis. I remember that. I'm sure most in here do. You can see a little dip after that, but then an acceleration again. And you can see how the pandemic created a momentary dip, but we're kind of back up beyond where we were in terms of the burning of fossil fuels and anomalies over time. You know, the red speaks for itself, right? Where we're going. Okay, so what are the impacts? This is sort of the somewhat depressing part of the presentation. I won't hit all of them, but let's do some highlights. Most of these slides are concentrated on the US impacts and from last year. So these are very recent, very hot, right? All these cities, a lot of heat. To me, that says a lot of air conditioning. Which is a lot of energy. You know, heat is dangerous, right? Heat is dangerous to our health. And it's an estimated that over 2,000 people died from heat exposure. Here's a snippet from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I think ironically, this was a Trump rally that they had. Unfortunately, a lot of health impacts of people waiting or attending that, being out in that heat for so long. Uninhabitable zones. So currently, you can see there's a few places in Africa where they're considered uninhabitable by humans. As we fast forward, you can see some areas of concern. And given our current trajectories, by 2070, this could be the amount of uninhabitable zones. Yeah, this one strikes me too, because this means climate refugees. We already are seeing climate refugees. A lot of the refugees coming out of like Sudan and whatnot were actually probably related to climate refugees. I'm actually surprised not to see anything in like in Alaska. I know a few of our villages there are you know, having to relocate already. And I didn't see any on our American cities, although certainly Miami is in one of the top vulnerable cities, New York, another one. But yeah, that's kind of a little depressing. Certainly flooding is a big issue. The surprise was how it happened in Asheville, North Carolina, a place that you would not normally think was vulnerable to flooding because they're so far inland. They've also taken steps around climate mitigation. But I wanted to share this. Just a day after that, there was actually flooding in Europe. This is a scene from Poland, and 24 people were killed in Europe due to flooding. So flooding is obviously a big issue. I wanted to show this, my atmospheric science people probably appreciate my awe in how big this thing is. I mean, it's covering the entire state of Florida. This was Hurricane Milton, which is only a category 3, which most of us think, oh, it's not a category 5. But I mean, look at how massive this is. And it certainly dumped a lot of water. Some parts received, you know, nearly I'm covering that, 2 feet of rain from that. But certainly extreme events, extreme weather events are becoming pretty common. This is the increase in the number of high, sort of heavy precipitation events. And you can see where we're living had the largest increase. It is something we're very vulnerable to, is a lot of rain a lot of the time. Actually, I'm a little bit of an office refugee right now. My office had the hallway in front of my office just before the fall started. We got a extreme rain event, and it put too much pressure on the pipes under the floor in that hallway, and we actually had an impromptu fountain. Flooding was mitigated. It wasn't a lot of flooding, right, mitigated, but that underlying problem of the pipes, you know, being that vulnerable. So they dug up the whole floor over intercession, and I'm going today to see if it's done, because I had to dig a little bit in my office too. But it's just the pipes are not made to withstand this amount of water coming so fast in many areas. Wildfires, right? We've seen a lot about why this is even before the most recent ones in LA. This shows you, oh, my little, I don't know if I can move this. Let me see. Right, I'm not even going to attempt to try to move that because I'm afraid I'm going to mess something up. But this was from September 2024. Some of the active wildfires that are happening in Canada or Northwest. And certainly LA has just recently undergone some huge devastation. Remember the smoke? Right? That was not on. Now we have created a climate risk assessment. What are we most vulnerable to because of impacts? What might we have to do in terms of adaptation or resiliency efforts? So, you know, one of the top of the list is air conditioning. You know, a lot of our residential halls do not have air conditioning. So how do we handle that moving forward? Because the students are there now when it's very hot. This was not on my bingo card, as they say. I did not think about air quality from wildfires, because you know, we aren't necessarily vulnerable to a lot of wildfires in our state, but because they're happening and the smoke is coming, now we have to think about how do we handle the air quality alerts that are happening and the poor air quality. And I don't know if any of you were in the city during this. I was upstate here and it was bad enough here, but in the city, it was just really, you couldn't even really go outside, you know, could not go outside. So okay, I'm already getting depressed doing this. I'm so sorry. All right, so as an economist, of course, I had to put this one in. Some of the things that makes, you know, everybody has their own motivators. And so the amount of money we're spending already on these natural, I air quote, natural disasters. They're sort of climate change induced strength weather events that are happening. I don't know how natural that is, but you know, over 3 trillion in the last decade. Where I think I've seen figures where if we spent that much, we could, you know, perhaps mitigate a lot of the future damages and impacts. But to say, let's spend 3 trillion, people are like, oh my God, that's a lot of money. It is a lot of money, but we do spend a lot of money, a lot of things. The more money we can put into climate change adaptation and mitigation now, the less we're going to have to spend in the future. We've done that concept on campus a lot with a lot of energy efficiency projects and conversion to renewable energy projects. Yes, we're going to pay a little bit more upfront, but we know in the long run, it's actually going to help us save. So, but that's always easier said than done. So this shows you the number of sort of extreme weather events by category. Storms and floods, especially floods, have increased the most over time. The extreme temperatures not quite as increased as much as the other categories. It has increased, but you know, let's see what next year brings, you know. So this is Greenland, so I wanted to bring yeah, I wanted to bring Greenland into it. It's going to be pretty liquid. It's not going to be as icy as it was. And you can see the chart of the declining glacier and ice in Greenland. And as a result, people are vulnerable to losing their homes. It's estimated in the US for a 2-degree centigrade rise, 12 million people could lose their homes. We're not at 2 degrees centigrade yet. We're just flirting with 1.5 right now. And the ways that climate change affect health, let me count the ways, right? Look at all these different potential impacts. You know, quite a threat to our own human health. And as Scott mentioned in my intro, you know, the wildlife, wildlife and the plants and our ecosystem. we could lose up to, one thing I found in the climate reality slides is they didn't have enough of this. But this kind of slides on our ecosystem impact. We are part of the ecosystem, so I'm struggling for the right word, but this one is perhaps losing up to 50% of all land-based species. Oh, this one has, I didn't realize this had sound on this one. It didn't say the sound on mine. So we've gone through a lot of these, but some of these we have not. Cost of carbon, some of these impacts are just one of them. It's just devastating, right? And we have a lot. Climate reality likes us to say, and it's the number one threat to the global economy is when you add all these up and look at all these potential impacts. Okay, so let's switch from what is to what can be done. Let's see if we can be a little more hopeful. Realistically hopeful. Most of you know me, I'm very pragmatic, I'm very realistic, but there is hope. There is hope because we do have a lot of technologies that can be adopted to address emissions, not only reduce emissions, but also help us adapt to some of the impacts we think we're going to have, even if we go net zero right now. Many ones. And we've implemented a lot of these on campus, certainly around energy efficiencies. We have solar panels on the roofs. As I mentioned, we're looking to do more ground source heat pumps. We currently have 2, one at Liberty Terrace, which is operated for over a decade very well, and one at E-Tech. E-Tech is our first non-fossil fuel building, as we sort of offset their electricity use with the solar panels we have on the podium. But the first thing is, reduce. How can we reduce, we're using? How can we do energy efficiency? And that's something you should think about in your own home. How do you reduce first? And then how do you fuel switch, as we say? How do you use renewables for the fuel you need, for the things you need fuel for? So this is from Project Drawdown. Are you familiar with Project Drawdown? Are people familiar? Oh, okay. Well, this is it's a pretty comprehensive undertaking to look at many strategies that could be done and attempts to quantify and sort of indicate what has the most impact, what's the most efficient. So I really encourage you, if you're not familiar with it, go to that website, drawdown.org, and you can take a look at it. A lot of it's very academic heavy. So it's, we're talking about people who are knowledgeable in this field doing it, not people who has an opinion about what's going on in these fields. Some of you can see the things. So refrigeration is something that is on our list to better keep track of and to better mitigate, to choose some refrigerants that are lower global warming potential. It's something that is a newer initiative for us. Reducing food waste is a high impact thing, and you can do that right at your home if you're able to. And we've started obviously composting in the dining halls and in the campus center. We also have an office composting program, small scale one, because it's run by my interns and they're not super mobile. So I don't know if I think we come over here. But there's lots of different ones. I'm gonna actually look at number 4 from, I know Gary's here, he's gonna love this part. I think a lot of it is about with food choices. I always tell people something you can do is decarbonize your food choices. That doesn't necessarily mean just eat plants, all right? In the sense of you have to think more about how what you're eating is made. Is it made at a place that is thinking about conservation and resource, using renewable energies at their farm, reusing water where they can, especially wastewater, using organic fertilizer. It's not just about, soy is obviously a plant, but there's a lot of unsustainable soy being harvested. And then students flock to that product. That's because it's not meat and it's maybe not as sustainable as they think. So food can get tricky, but certainly if you So it's a lot about thinking about where your food is coming from and how it's being produced is very important.
Mary Ellen,
Yes,
is this slide, I assume it's like CO2 equivalents in the far right.
I believe it is, yes.
Is it the amount of CO2 equivalents that particular sector uses, or is it the amount that they think they can reduce?
The latter, the amount they think can be reduced if you make certain switches.
That's the potential, not.
Potential,
what it is.
correct. Thank you for those clarifying ones, yeah. And like I said, I'm gonna invoke my generalist here. You know, I haven't drilled down into all these deeply, but yes, what they're trying to do is, what is the potential if you switch to this technology? Because a lot of people get a list of, here's all the things you can do, like the first one, here's all the technologies. Well, what one do I want to do first? Well, what one's the most impactful? You know, so this is meant to try to help provide a guide for that.
If I may, so for the people that aren't into this, CO2 equivalent
Oh, yeah.
includes all greenhouse gases, but tries to put them on a equal footing.
Mhm.
And so that's the way you can put all greenhouse gases into one number.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I meant to mention that at that first slide when it said greenhouse gas emissions, because it's not right. You hear about carbon dioxide, that's the big boy that gets all the, press. But there's also methane, which is this, another one you hear a lot about that mostly is coming out of landfills, and the cows are getting, really beat up about it for some reason. Other things fart and burp too, but anyway, but yeah, there's actually 6, and to make it sort of, for simplicity's sake, it is combined into what they call CO2 equivalent.
Now, Mary Ellen,
Yeah.
I know since I met you, I think
Yeah.
right shortly after you were hired here, and I remember you always ran these annual energy
Mhm,
use audits. Now, can at my home, I get my kilowatt hours and
Mhm.
therms of gas used for my home. Have you been monitoring that at SUNY, the whole campus here? Do we get a
Yes.
utility bill from Niagara Mohawk?
Oh,
We probably
yes.
have our own. What have those numbers done over the time you've?
Yeah, we have switched, so we don't really do the campaign that we used to do anymore.
But you do get
But
the energy.
we
You
do-
get the natural gas bill, for example.
Yes,
What does
but
that show?
we do take a look at the natural gas bill and the electricity bills. And yes, we had about a 15% decrease in electricity use from 2008. But now I would say it's more about a 10% decrease because we've opened more buildings. So we do use less electricity than we were. Part of that is behavioral, but a lot of it is automated stuff that is taken hold
Shut off
now.
the lights.
So yeah, the lights are automated, the computers are somewhat automated. The schedule, the air handler schedule is automated, and that helped reduce a lot. So
What
we
about natural gas.
natural gas, yeah, you put me on the spot. I'm trying to think if we have reduced. We haven't reduced a lot. Natural gas is a little bit tougher.
Well, it's heating.
It's heating, right? We do have temperature control at the central plant. We have reduced a little bit, but not much. It varies up and down depending on
Okay. No,
weather.
I'm just curious.
No, but we haven't
You
seen
mentioned-
decreases.
You mentioned you've
Yeah.
had good success.
We have had some good success with energy efficiency strategies, and a lot of those have been more geared towards electricity than heat. But that's why with our heat, we're kind of like, we did the temperature thing, but now we're trying to figure out how do we source it, like I said, from renewables. So yeah.
Where's the campus across the street come in under that? And it's sort of a sideline. I don't see anything about water usage
That's 2 great questions.
Which-
So
across the street.
yes. I'll answer that part first, and I'll talk about it across the street. One of the things I feel, even when I do calculate the carbon footprint for the campus, and our energy officer, Indu, does a lot more of the monitoring. We do have an energy officer, she'll monitor the actual use and do a lot of the reporting to SUNY that needs to be done. But I feel like it doesn't always capture the ecological footprint, and water is one of those. So the only way you kind of see water show up is like the heating water, the electricity we use to heat it. But I do put in our carbon footprint, our wastewater, our estimated wastewater. But I agree with you. I think when you talk about carbon emissions, water is going to get underrepresented in some ways. Even your biodiversity efforts, your engagement efforts, they don't really show up necessarily directly in your carbon footprint. This is looking at what we have operational control. So what do we own and operate? So we do not own and operate the health sciences campus, so they're moving back to the podium. We do not own and operate across the street. So, you know, we don't include their use in our footprint. Okay, what is this slide? Oh, okay. I could use some input from my climate science, atmospheric sciences on this one. All right, so one of the professors or climate scientists, there's two climate sciences I kind of like to go to in terms of knowledge and communication. Michael Mann is one. He's at Penn State. Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, who's at Texas A&M, is another one. But this is sort of, let's turn the corner. Is there some hope? I saw this slide and I wanted to pull it out with a little trepidation because I feel like I can't say this with authority, but according to Michael Mann, if we do implement a net zero strategy and achieve net zero, there will be a lag. I know there'll be a lag before you see temperature begin to come down because carbon hangs out a little bit, but he actually said, no, we should begin to see global temperatures decreasing within 3 to 5 years, you know, if we get to a net zero emissions. So in other words, we can make it come down and it won't take us decades to do so, according to Dr. Mann. I do know the recent projections that I'm on Blue Sky now, if any of you do social media. It's a great place to learn about climate scientists than the other place. They were talking, new projections came out and where originally it was being projected a 3 to 4 degrees Celsius change. It's now being projected based on global efforts that have happened to a 2.7 degrees Celsius change, which we know those 3 points make a difference, but it doesn't sound like a lot, but it does. So there has already been a change in our trajectory, mild, but still 2.7 is almost double what we're doing right now. And we're thinking about what we are experiencing now at not quite 1.5. We may not want to mess with 2.7, but you know, the point is action can make a difference into the future we have, or maybe we should say the future our children and our grandchildren are going to have. Of course, the Paris Agreement was probably the last big, in my opinion, that was editorial comment, climate agreement that took place. Every nation at that time agreed to work together. Many nations took it seriously, especially European nations, and have been working on this for years. So it's off on the thing. I feel like the recent COPs, the Conference of Parties is where they do this, which is the UN hosts these Conference of Parties, have been, in my opinion, infiltrated by the fossil fuel industry. So they're, I don't know, a little sad when I look at those, but this agreement is been very seminal. You may have heard we're not in it now, or there's an intent to withdraw. It will actually take years to withdraw. And I'll be quite honest, it's more symbolic because a lot of these actions have become embedded systemically for many, state level, for business, other orgs. But if you have not seen, Chancellor King did provide a statement on our continued commitment to the tenets of the Paris Agreement. And it's a group called America is All In that we're part of. And we've, you know, kind of pulling out the playbook from 2016, 2017, the last time this happened. But I did want to share that statement with you. Okay, so there's about 425 global companies have made a commitment to go renewable. Ooh, there's a lot there. I'm not going to say every single one of them is sincere and doing it in good faith and making progress, but there are a lot of them that are. You know, it is embedded in business now, a lot of these sustainable practices. So we have the business sector, we have government sector. There's a governor's coalition, there's a mayor's coalition, there's higher ed coalitions around climate change and sustainability, a lot of NGOs. These four I pointed out because there are local chapters of all of these. our 350.org group goes by the name Pause. I don't know if you've heard of them. Third Act is a newest sort of subset of 350.org. Sunrise Movement and Fridays for Future. So there's two, those are student active groups. I will mention the Inflation Reduction Act. There may be some fear what's going to happen with this, but this was a law passed by Congress, which not necessarily can be dismissed by executive order. It's created the funding, and I think what it has done is really for businesses that were thinking about going on this path, have started going on this path to plan for a electrified future that's powered by renewables. I guess that's how I could, and so they're kind of moving forward on it. So it's almost like something systemic things have been put in place that isn't necessarily going to be reversed, at least maybe by one person. So we'll see. Now I'm going to talk about UAlbany's sustainability. So thank you for indulging me on that first journey. I feel like I was sort of imposter syndrome on that part. On this part, I feel a little more comfortable about what we're doing here and what we've done. So let's just set the table. How do we define sustainability? Well, Gary Coppell helped me define that. Remember we made that definition in 2012. That was a big thing. You know, as academics, we want to define things first. It's really hard to define sustainability in one sentence or two sentences. The UN created the Sustainable Development Goals. All countries participated in their development. They were preceded by the Millennium Development Goals, which did not get a lot of traction in the United States. These are what I'm using to help define sustainability. And whenever I bring them to a presentation with students or staff members and faculty, they resonate with them. They can see themselves in these goals. They can see the things they're passionate about. They can see how sustainability is about social issues like hunger and poverty and equity and good health. And they can see how there's also the traditional environmental ones, as well as a place for industry here too. Responsible consumption and production, sustainable communities. So I really, I like using these as a way to define what sustainability is. And I'll share these slides and I'm sure Scott will share the link. There's a little quick video, but that's more to show to students because there's a lot of famous people in it and they're like, oh, okay, But we do have sustainability in the strategic plan as a value under common good. Sorry, it's a little fuzzy there. I couldn't copy quite clearly. More recently, both climate science and health disparities have been designated as signature strengths in terms of our research. Those aren't the only signature strengths. Those are just the two that are most affiliated with sustainability, climate action. And many of you may be aware that in 2019, the state passed the CLCPA, which posted aggressive goals. And well, they're aggressive, but they're science-based goals. So they're science-based goals of how can we stay under 1.5 degrees Celsius. That's our goal, to stay under that increase. 2022, the governor issued Executive Order 2022. No relation between the year and the number, that was the one. And you can see some of the things in EO 22 that we are now planning for, providing plans on how we're going to get to and reporting on. So beyond just renewable energy, also reducing waste, plastic, beginning to, as an economist, of course, I love it, embodied carbon in our buildings and considering the value of carbon, setting a value for carbon and being able to use that in our decision-making and incorporating the needs of disadvantaged communities as well. So it's pretty comprehensive. So we have a lot of push, and I know many of you were here when Kermit Hall, right, was in residence. It's before I was here, but a product, I think of Kermit Hall, and I think in a way, the whole Inconvenient Truth time period spurred a lot of, let's establish a position. I love the mission that that task force had, that we have an obligation and an opportunity. I love those two words as a public entity. So the mission in my office and the vision that we follow is trying to foster ecological literacy so we can inspire these solutions to global challenges. Sorry, the formatting is a little off there. So my office really seeks to try to connect people, empower people, and communicate. We're a small but mighty office, lots of student helpers and workers. Unfortunately, I can't do all the work, but I can help coordinate it. I can help assess what we're doing. I can help try to keep my ear on best practices, learn new things. So that's what we're doing. And we do have a sustainability plan with these 6 tenets. You know, as I mentioned, ecological literacy, doing impactful research, providing equal access, accessibility, community leadership, not only planning for carbon neutrality, but also planning for climate resiliency and creating a culture of sustainability. So the last one is a lot of the engagement work, a lot of the behavioral practices we do in offices, and also just educate on people can take these practices to their home. Yeah, yes, go ahead. Now we'll take action. I will go back. Yeah.
Community leadership, is that sort of for campus community or all basic?
External, yes. That's not gonna work, all right? Yes, external. So we're trying to participate in both local, state, national, you know, groups, doing presentations, getting out there. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in some of the taking action slides. So how are we addressing sustainability? Well, through 2 different forms of engagement, through our academics, through our research, and through our operations. A lot of people automatically think about operations solely, but there's actually all these other circles that we are looking into and doing. We have over a dozen majors, and we have a minor in sustainability, but I look at it as when students ask me they're interested in sustainability, well, what are you interested in? Are you interested in the planning aspect? Or you want to do policy and advocacy? Or do you want to work on health and resiliency? Or is it science and engineering? We got it. Just tell me what aspect you're interested in. So this shows you, this is a little dated, but I just love the visual, but it takes a long time to make this visual. So that's why it's a little dated, but I took a course description, the undergraduate and graduate bulletin, read the course descriptions and aligned them with the UN Sustainable Development Goals to see where do they come out, you know, where are we most focusing our sustainability efforts? So you can see, you know, good health gets there, decent work and economic growth, life on land. You know, it's kind of like an illustrative. I would never submit this for any kind of academic publication in the form that it's in, but it gave me an idea of a feel for what's our flavor of sustainability. What are we teaching a lot about and what are we researching? This one I have a little more confidence in because I actually go to every faculty website and I look and see what projects they're doing and their research. And if they publish within the last 3 years, you know, or they're cited a project they're working on, I put it in my database and I align it with the global goals. So here's another one that shows how good health and equity and climate action and life on land come up very often. And of course, we use the campus as a living lab, sometimes as demonstration, even just to research what kind of bins are we going to put in the dorms. And that's what those 2 students researched on the left. In the middle, that fuzzy thing, sometimes outside entities come to us and ask us to provide interns for, this was a GIS mapping for the Albany Stormwater Coalition, of which we're part of. I don't have them in my coalition. I'll have to write that on that slide. And then a student made this graphic to help with water conservation in the res halls. And this is a cling that's put on the mirrors in the bathrooms of the apartments and the dorms to help remind them about water conservation. In terms of operations, wow, just a little bit. I specifically aligned these with what we need to report on in EO 22. So I report, well, except for food systems. That's the only one that I don't have to report on for EO 22, but there's also a new executive order on New York food products. So, but I can include food in our carbon footprint. But this is all data we collect on the energy we're using, renewable energy, the buildings. We have over a dozen LEED certified buildings, which is a energy and environmental certification. So that's a lot of, I could take other questions on what we're doing, but we'd be here all day. Also in this slide deck, there's additional slides where some of these I drill down and give you some visuals of what we're doing. But they're all interconnected, you know, there's all this interconnected web. So this is the green scene, not my office. This is the green scene. On the left is our student allies. So some of them are individuals. Eco reps are in my office. They're peer educators, but some are in student association. The rest are different student groups that do programming. Some of them are not quite active this year, so I update it each year. And then on the right is myself and the energy officer, and we have two main groups. We have coordinators that meet monthly and help determine during the academic year. And they help me more with the decision making, but they also help create some of the programs like the Green Workspace Challenge. So our offices can get certified as a green workspace, the Terra Awards, which recognize, have some winners in this room, recognize achievement and sustainability on campus. And for people who are like, look, I can't take another meeting. You could be an ambassador who just kind of help spread the word. Because really what I find is about behavioral change is you need that word to, you know, word of mouth kind of help. Now there are listservs for all of these. Each week I put it out this morning. Some of you may be on the Think Green listserv where I have student interns that help me compile events, mostly in events on campus, but sometimes we'll bring in an external event and opportunities. The Think Green, I focus also on conferences, publication opportunities, grant opportunities, where the Live Green tends to be more of the student programming in the dorms and whatnot. So if you want to join that, at the end, I have a way you can tell you how to join that. Yes.
But not small. Could you read the list of student groups or is?
I will. I have no problem doing that. No. So some of the, so there are green liaisons for student organizations. That's a new initiative of SA. So that's not necessarily a group, but there's UAlbany Students for Sustainability, Grow Green, which does the garden on campus, UAlbany Outreach for Animals. UNA USA is a United Nations Association. Our chapter, we have a chapter of the New York Water Environment Association, also a chapter of the Capital Region American Meteorological Society. We have the UAlbany Indigenous Association, Students Stopping the Trafficking of People, Democracy Matters, the Young Democrats Socialists of America, and Mutual Aid. They're kind of a joint group. UAlbany Outdoors, the Ski and Snowboarding Club, and the UAlbany Running Exchange. Those are all groups that have interacted with us on different projects. No problem. So it's kind of getting a cut off, but this is where I forgot to add the Albany Stormwater Coalition. But as a campus, we are part of two national organizations, ASHE, which stands for the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Ed, and Second Nature. Second Nature focuses more on carbon mitigation and adaptation, where ASHE is broad, everything. They also oversee a program called STARS, which we do a lot. Some of the formatting's off, it's bothering me, but don't worry, you can get it. It does a comprehensive it's an assessment tool. So if you are interested in that, if you have an albany.edu email, which I think most of you do, you can go to ASHE and create an account under that. We have an institutional membership, and then you have access to their member resources. But there's also a state level group. There's a SUNY group. There's actually an Albany City College campus group. We're part of the Sustainable Solution Network, and that's where I get a lot of my grant opportunity notices from. The coalition that Chancellor King gave that statement to. We're part of a recycling group, and at the bottom it says Clean City Coalition, which is a transportation group. Plus, as I mentioned, Albany Stormwater Coalition, I forgot about that. So these are really great for keeping your, helping yourself stay sane and strive towards common goals. Okay, So I don't like leaving it that individuals think they have to solve the climate crisis. You certainly can't, shouldn't, but you do have agency over a lot of things, right? And I'm sure a lot of you, and a lot of you I know, are doing a lot of these things. My, 5 easy steps is, reduce, reuse, and recycle, and apply that to things more than just waste. Decarbonize your energy if you can. If you can do renewables at your house or heat pumps, I've done a couple renewable systems and haven't regretted it. If you can choose your transportation choices, as we talked about with food choices, think about more about how your food is made, where it's coming from. You can vote with your dollar and your vote, not only vote with your vote, and every vote, every level, even your local planning commission has a lot of control over whether they're going to allow large scale renewable energy projects in your, for example, I'm in a place where you have to have 100 acres to be able to have a large scale renewable energy project. A lot of companies come out, there are a lot of companies that are doing the best they can towards climate mitigation, and there are some that are just posers, right? So it's hard sometimes to tell the difference. So if you see a company that needs to there's a difference between extending your goal, your timeline, and just backing away completely from your climate goals. There's been a few companies that I actually have bought from that began to back away from their climate commitments, and I no longer buy from them. All right, I'm one person, I maybe spend a couple thousand a year with them, but hey, I don't care. I'm not going to give them my money, Communicate what you're doing. As I mentioned, there's a link to Dr. Hayhoe's. It's an oldie, but a goodie. It's a classic. How do you talk about climate change? And seek to join a group. These are some of the Project Drawdown 15 sustainable solutions you might be able to do. And there's lots under each, there's lots, multitude of ways. So final word from Climate Reality. Join us and those who are using their voices, their votes, and their choices to fight for the future, their community, and their world. Here's the contact info for my office. We are on 3 social media platforms, mostly speaking to the students through Instagram. As I mentioned, we're probably gonna create an account on Blue Sky. It's a very climate friendly platform that has a lot of good discussions. If you're not on Blue Sky, think about it. And they have a lot of starter packs. So I joined like the Dr. Catherine Hayhoe recommended climate starter pack. So I'm following a lot of climate scientists. I'm also following a lot of journalists who help debunk a lot of the, disinformation you see. LinkedIn, we mostly post job offerings, but I will say LinkedIn is another place where people can have discussions about climate change without it turning into, personal attacks. Which unfortunately has happened to, not me, luckily, but people who are in the climate world. So if you do want to join the Be Green or the Think Green, because Be Green is for our alumni and friends, I just more focus on external events. Think Green is the academic stuff that's happening on campus. You can either email me at gogreen@albany.edu, or that's the website that you can go to and you can click on a link there. And so that's my whirlwind tour. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. Question in the back.
I admire everything you've said, but our villain-in-chief says it's all a hoax and drill, baby, drill. So we're fucked. I mean, I can't imagine where you stand in this. I can't imagine you go to bed with equanimity. Tell us how you're gonna get through the next 4 years.
It's really interesting that I'm not as panicked as I was the last time. I'm fortunate that I'm surrounded by people who are moving forward and making contributions and making change, and especially around the students. So I guess that sustains me in a way. I know a lot of the people who do what I do or even are involved in the climate world. There's a lot of talk about self-care, just how do you unplug from what you're doing and like, you know, kind of have self-care. I think, I'm not excited, obviously, about the drill baby drill stuff, but it remains to be seen how much that's gonna get actually implemented and what the impact will be. From a business perspective, you know, the renewables are becoming the most affordable form of energy. And there's a lot more global demand for like electric vehicles than outside the US than here. So, I don't know, I guess I'm just an optimist. And I am tenacious and driven and surround myself with people who are moving forward and these coalitions, you know, I see all this happening. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, you know, great that there's, and I get to see a lot of the data and I get to see a lot of the changes that have happened. Like, I know, like I mentioned before, it doesn't seem much that we've reduced our future in terms of increase in global temperatures, but that's huge that we were able to make that shift. So, I kind of look at it as it's going to phase out. I don't know when, but it's going to fossil fuel is going to phase out.
Okay.
How's that? Don't give up hope. Yes, Gary.
First, Mary Ellen, I would like to say how much of an impact you've made in a positive way to our students over the years.
No, it's
And many of our students aren't here anymore. They're out living their lives with what you taught them. So that's important.
right. And you too. You too.
So, to respond to that, the last person, Pam and I sometimes look at each other and we said, well, the good news is we're old and we'll be dead soon.
Yeah.
You know, we live, we live our lives as sustainably as we can. And we know that the food we're producing on our farm is not only removing more carbon than we're putting into the atmosphere, but it's also contributing to our health and delaying that inevitable thing. But the question I had for you is, you've been here now since 2008.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what you see as the trajectory of the sustainability program on our campus? Has it risen to its peak and declining, or is it?
It's definitely risen. I don't know if we're at the peak. I think our brand of sustainability is a very social justice, equity oriented brand of sustainability. So no, I just see it continuing. It's becoming ingrained in the majority of the students who come here, and they're much more aware than the students that we were working with back in the day. They just come almost like after the students, we got done with them at 4 years, they're at that starting point. That's their starting point, you know? So there is a lot of students who come in knowledgeable about a lot of this stuff. And a lot of them have been impacted by climate change. A lot of them, you know, I think around 20, after Sandy is when I saw a lot of differences of students who were coming in because they had personally, a lot of them, their high school had been destroyed or their home. And so I'm trying more to give them reasons to move forward on action and not get into climate anxiety. A lot of them have such anxiety over what's going to happen in the world. But I think, again, to answer like what half answer Carol's question too, it's like we're in the fight, and in a way it helps us because we're moving forward. We're not isolated. We're with each other, and we see some differences. So that's in a way helpful, I guess. I had a question back there. Yes.
So, one of the most, sort of obvious ways that people contribute to sustainability is separating their food into, you know, this is recyclable, this isn't, those different things. But it always seems to me that they're a mess, that they're not really, so I'm just wondering how successful that is. Can you measure that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. And, you know, honestly, so that's a behavioral change thing, you know, and that's something that you're going to have to educate on that over and over and over and over again. So sometimes I'm like, if I have to do one more, what goes in the recycling bin program, I'm gonna scream. And you have to think about what is the impact of it. And I'm not dismissing that because people want to know about that, but we've really changed our trajectory a little bit in what we're saying to say, stop making waste. You know, you won't have that problem. You know, divert your food waste. That's a biggie. You know, a lot of mandates have come down now around plastic. And that's really the problematic thing is the darn plastic. You know, there's so many kinds of plastic and there's so many ways you have to recycle it. And we don't have those kinds of facilities in our country to a large extent. So I will say we don't try to focus on recycling. Students are very big into like thrifting now. We do a lot of, you know, thrift and swaps. And so we capitalize on that mindset. And now we're trying to ask our offices to be more mindful of what they're buying and maybe looking at things that are made more from recycled content, avoid plastic if you can. So that's some of the things we're doing. Yeah, because you're right. That isn't an endless. Now, what can we do? You know, we've made a pretty good investment in recycling bins and waste bins that are color coded, that have words, that have pictures. You can set the table, you know, for the students and for the staff, it's not just students, everybody, right? That they can follow, but it's really hard if you're not there holding their hand. And on the back of the student doors, all the doors have what is recyclable, and they have all these, you know, pictures of what they can put in their recycling bin. But ultimately, it's the end user that decides what goes in each bin. So you just, as a teacher, right, you give them the knowledge and just hope they do it. Yes.
Man, I remember I got here in the mid-80s and our campus, when it was built in 1960, they did the most innovative environmental thing I can think of. They put that big smokestack power plant on Fuller Road where they had a cogeneration facility. They were burning diesel fuel and they were capturing the waste heat and pumping it to all the buildings. And my understanding is that that's an innovative use of, it's a way to heat with the waste energy that you generate with the electricity you use. And so it's a really,
yeah.
Now that should have been I thought that, did that get closed down? I thought they switched it from oil to diesel to natural gas. And now is that running? Are you aware of what that power plant on Fuller Road is doing?
Yeah, so it's on natural gas mostly. Oil is our backup. We don't do heat recovery from the plant per se, but we do some. Well, the natural gas power plant heats or cools the water that goes through those pipes in the tunnels. So what we have done is a net zero plan to convert that to a low temperature hot water, because right now it's traveling at almost 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah,
is thawed under it.
Yeah.
You have
Oh,
those
yeah,
pipes.
yeah.
It's amazing. That was beautiful innovation.
Yeah.
Way ahead of its time.
Yeah, so we are going to lower the temperature because we want to go to more of a ground source heat pump, which is basically using electricity now to heat our buildings from renewables. We do some heat recovery in buildings per se, but not the whole heat waste generation from the pipes. We have insulated a lot of the pipes to prevent the waste on some areas.
Well, no, to me, turning down the raw steam, the waste steam and converting.
It's hot
that
water.
to-
Yeah, it's not
Well, it's
steam.
hot water, but
Yeah.
that's waste heat that normally, you see those big cooling towers at any other power plant.
Mhm.
They're just going to they're going to waste, whereas all the cities in Europe use it. They put the power plant right in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
And you have come into every house,
Yeah.
a hot steam pipe that you
Yeah.
heat yourself with
We
the
are-
waste
yeah.
of that power plant, but we don't like power plants in cities. But we put a power plant right in the city.
Right in
We
the-
have
yeah,
a
right in the
great-
city,
it's
yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we are currently looking at doing an upgrade on our absorption chillers, which will allow for those, I'm kind of speaking on something I don't have a lot of details on, but Indu would be able to explain more, but we are looking, yes, to convert, the delivery system a little bit to allow for not having to heat the water as high of a temperature. And right now Indu is working on an absorption chiller upgrade project, which may include a heat recovery.
That's air conditioning. That's handy.
Yeah, well, and we also know like I mentioned before, we're talking about, do we need to begin adding air conditioning, to some of the areas? I don't want to, but when you have students in their rooms passing out, it's something you have to consider. we did get actually to do that project, the absorption chiller. We did get a $30 million appropriation from the states and in a line item to us, which was like unheard of that we got that. A lot of that was due to a coalition between the League of Conservation Voters and the, not surprisingly, the Pipe Fitters Union to help advocate for that. So I can't, I wish I could speak more eloquently or in the details of that, but I know that that's something that we've studied a lot in terms of what's the best conversion to do, but there's a state mandate that they want us not to use the gas, so, you have that too. Yes.
So the, one thing that occurred to me, you pay a lot of money to National Grid, you said, so. Well, is it an option for a university like this to do community solar? I know there's only so much rooftop and there's a bunch of panels up there, but community solar seems like, savings and also moves a lot of the.
Most definitely. There is, so the way we do our electricity purchases, we partner with OGS next door as a buying group. So our electricity is rather inexpensive.
Okay.
One.
So community solar is not gonna help a lot.
Well, but not that it won't help us. We do want to invest in off-site renewable energy projects. One of our challenges is if it's what they call behind the meter, is you're only limited to 5 megawatts of energy, renewable energy behind the meter. We've already got 2. And if OGS does anything, then we're on the same meter with them. So there's these regulatory stuff when you get down into it to try to do it. But we had a 16 campus coalition that went out about 4 years ago to invest in renewable energy projects on the state. But the voluntary market in the state changed a little bit, and it's different from what you may encounter in other states. So we couldn't match a variable price. For us to make it work, we wanted to do a fixed price with an escalation clause over the next 20 years. Variable price means you pay the going rate. We couldn't afford to compete against an entity that would pay the going rate. So the people that we didn't contract with them, so I can't use that word, but the projects we had selected to invest in, their developers pulled out because I don't blame them. Economically, they could get a better price somewhere else. So that was challenging. But we were looking at, we're looking at purchasing something like 60 megawatts. Yeah. A lot of community solars are 2 to 5, and again, we have that behind the meter problem too. If we can't do it behind the meter. So sorry, getting in the weeds and some of that. So behind the meter is just where the energy is, I don't know. Yeah.
Where you put the solar panel.
Well, yeah, like very often in your house, like you'll have if you put solar panels on your house, they can keep National Grid often can keep track of how much you generate, and they'll kind of take it off your net use, so it's sort of behind the meter. Yeah.
So the panels push energy into the grid, and then you take your energy from the grid but you get a credit.
Correct.
As opposed to there being a device that splits, that pulls energy into your outlets.
Right.
From either the connection from the meter or from a solar panel.
Correct. Correct. Yes.
So,
Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
In some ways, I'm even more pessimistic than Carol. So I'm surprised that I'm actually coming up with a reasonably optimistic comment here. I'm reading the New York Times recently, and I can't recall what days or how much it's the reporters have been. But it turns out that there are a pretty fair number of businesses, and some of them quite large, who have gotten far enough along in trying to accommodate and deal with these issues that it's like changing the direction of an ocean liner.
Right. Yeah.
They've already invested quite a bit of money in the kinds of things that you've been talking about. And it's not going to be something that they easily say, oh, well, Trump has said this, so forget it. We're going to go off in this other direction. And some of them are quite unhappy with the actions that the current administration is pursuing because they're interfering with what their plans are and with what their investments are. And I think that's actually probably the most telling way in which he might be stymied in trying to stop all of this.
No, that's a good observation. I think you're right. I share the same kind of sentiment.
I think it's eventually gonna come back to bite some of the entities currently, because as I understand, the new engineering educational push is that something that is created must be able to be completely recyclable. So if you pull it out of the ground, you manufacture it, you use it, at the end, it has to go back into the ground, period. That's that was, I had that from the former chair in economics at CNSE, and that seems to be, and the Dean of Engineering was here saying, oh, we may have a couple of new engineering programs coming along. It would seem that would be the way to push some of these things forward, as that's the going way of engineering.
Right. Supply chain management, materials management is gonna be big, yeah.
And new materials.
Yeah.
How would that be incentivized?
Economics, it's already.
Yeah, there we go, right?
Less
I mean, I think,
than done.
yeah,
So
That's a
ground
great
to
answer.
ground is cheaper than just throwing it away, and society takes the cost of dealing with the waste.
It's how you value cheap.
You get some cheap.
I mean,
There are downstream costs to everything.
So
Throwing it away costs you nothing. You know, what happens to it after it leaves your hand has costs that come back to you.
Of course, but when you work,
Jim, did you?
okay, so one of the interesting things in the cost benefit analyses, and Chris and I have argued over this for years, is that the one of the biggest costs of that is healthcare. You know, when you throw crap into the air, into the water, into the ground, it extracts a huge cost to healthcare, and that can be, if that's monetized.
The crux of it is if I have a factory that manufactures anything, manufactures toasters, right? Maybe I manufacture a toaster. Unless there's regulation, all I care about is the profit I make.
Right, the key word was
And-
unless there's regulation.
Yes, yeah, okay, so.
So
So what we're talking about is developing a scheme where overall there are regulations.
well, being a
and
society
incentives
rather
that-
than individuals.
That society driven by politics creates regulations that give various kinds of mandates, especially economic mandates, to business controllers to make them do what society wants.
And that's a good point to maybe close on. I don't know how much time we have, but like that society, you know, what's the societal appetite for these kinds of things? We're in a society that frankly, we're not well equipped to deal with the issue of climate change. We're not very communal society minded. We some people, right, phrase at policy. You know, you look at other countries where that's not an issue, you know, you see more progress, even, dare I say, even China, you know, they could certainly, they want to go in a certain direction, they've been going a certain direction, they can move there pretty quickly, but you know, I mentioned my energy officer, she just came back with others from SUNY Central that took a trip to Denmark to get a view of how they're doing their energy systems. And certainly it's a much smaller country, you know, scalability is an issue. But it was amazing to see the things that they had implemented. And I listened to a presentation where they were talking about their trip. And the word that came up a lot was mindset. Different mindset that allowed the things. And also not one thing. They had like, they thought, oh, we're going to see a lot of geothermal and that kind of stuff, ground source heat pumps. It was a variety of things. In fact, geothermal was only 3% of their energy needs. So it's there's a lot of cultural and societal stuff that comes in with addressing this issue. Yeah, Jim?
I want to thank everybody here. I've learned a tremendous amount. But I want to come back to the issue of, we're effed. And that may well be the case. I mean, I think that the climate by itself the changes are terrifying. And that, whatever the next 4 years is about is what it's about. But we have to not, bury ourselves in self-care. We
Right,
have to find ways to connect with others who care
yeah,
about these issues, because it's going to take a lot of coalitions
yes,
for action at the very least. And all we really have, to lose is what we gain is the sense that we try to face this problem with our own, not just our bodies, but with the groups we can connect with, the
Right.
coalitions of all kinds. You listed it very nicely, and I'll be emailing you for a little while.
sure.
But anyway, I want to thank you very much for that. And
You're welcome.
Other people said,
Yeah.
it's been very important.
Right.
Discussion.
I mean, there will be differences in the future. If it's so far that we're effed, I'm not sure, but I think there are definitely choices. Like I've counseled my daughter on decisions she needs to make when she chooses where to live and where to buy a home. These are things that you are going to be in the decision making for our children or our grandchildren. Just making your best guesstimate of what's going to be coming and what's going to happen where. So it will be different, but it may not be. We'll be the ones that will know the laws, I think, the most. Right?
Thank you.
That's kind of a really depressing way to end.
I gotta tell you, I feel like I've been to a gospel session where we got all the heavy duty sermon and then we just started singing just now. So I'll be quiet and that'll be a big step ahead. Let me get a little commercial in here, if I may. Our next speaker, the second speaker of the spring, will be Dr. Janelle Hobson, who will speak to us on Tuesday, February the 11th. We have to make that change because she teaches just a whole bunch of stuff on Mondays. And Janelle is really, really good. She is the guru of I wrote all this down, but Harriet Tubman lives within her. And she'll be speaking on the facets of the life of that grand engineer of the Underground Railroad, upstate New Yorker Harriet Tubman, who really recently was elevated to the status of general in the U.S. Army, posthumously, of course. And due to her teaching schedule, it'll be on Tuesday, the 11th, not on our standard. At the same time. Here.